Hi guys, before we get started today, there's a couple of quick announcements I want to make. First, I want to talk to you about Podcast Republic. It's an app for Android phones. If you listen to Not Another Fake Newscast and you own an Android device, you should do me a big favour and go in the Google Play Store and download the Podcast Republic app. It's a fantastic app that allows you to get all your favourite podcasts directly to your Android phone. I've used the app. I can search for podcasts I want to listen to, favourite them. I can have them all just one click away. So make sure that you set Not Another Fake Newscast as your favourite, and you won't miss any new episodes from us. So again, that app is called the Podcast Republic app, and it's available on any and all Android devices, and you can get that on your Google Store. Another amazing announcement I want to make is one of our new sponsors. It's Holzkern. That's Holzkern, and you can find them at www.holzkern.com. Their watches, they're made from wood and marble. It's quite a young Austrian company, and they take pride in their unique watch design. As I said, the watches are made of wood and marble and some other precious, semi-precious stones. They are very, very cool. Both myself and Jerry have one, and we've been gracious enough to be given an offer code that will get you 15% off your watch purchases. So that's NAFNC 15. That's NAFNC 15, and that'll get you 15% off any of your watch purchases off the website. So want to go there, have a look at their stuff. It's all very cool, and get your own unique piece of nature with Holzkern. Now on to the show.
Come gather round me, children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. The doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Been to one of our events before. Tonight's going to be a bit different because we've got a bit of a different format with having the podcast, but they're going to give us a brief talk, and then we're going to have a break for about 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a Q&A, and then that'll be us for the night. Before we get on with Not Another Fake Newscast with Paul and Jerry, I'll tell you about our upcoming events. So on the 3rd of June is our discussion group, and that's at Jeremiah's Tap Room, which is off Elm Row, and that's on utilitarianism, and that's 2 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. And that's just a little discussion group we have where we talk about an idea, and there's some research online that people can have a look at if they want to get involved. On the 9th of June, we're going to be down at the Meadows Festival, so anyone who's there, come by and say hello. We'll be doing like experiments and stuff, and hoping to get into people to remember who we are. And on the 21st of June, we're doing a fundraiser for the PBH for the Free Fringe, and we've got an amazing magician called David Alnick, and his Free Fringe show, you usually have to queue for like an hour and a half to get in, but he's coming to do his new show for us in June. So if you want to come and see that, he's really worth seeing. He's very funny and brilliant, and yeah, he's great. And he might do a bit of a Q&A about how, you know, things to do in magic and like how he does his tricks and shit. So I will leave you now with Paul and Jerry McCann and Not Another Fake Newscast.
Hello, so we're Not Another Fake Newscast.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Jerry, and we normally do a podcast. We're going to do a talk for you tonight. You'll be able to find us on www.notanotherfakenewscast.com if you like it. If not, don't bother. And yeah, let's kick off with it, basically. The name of the show is When Is News Fake? And then there's a bit of a blurb there. I'll be honest, when we wrote that, it was about 3 or 4 months before we wrote the show, so it might not be entirely relevant, but hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation.
It'll be something similar to that, so don't worry.
So essentially what we're about is we are a news and politics podcast, and we basically the way that we look at news and politics in the modern world is that it is a lot of the language is impenetrable, it's boring, it's dull, and a lot of the population are not interested in it.
Yeah, similar to legalese, they use language intentionally to make it non-exciting, to make sure that people ignore like what's actually going on in the papers, because in the grand scheme of things, it's probably best for the general populace to not have that much interest in politics, because a lot is dodgy.
Yeah, the less transparency there is, the easier it is for them to get away with corruption. So what we try and do is to make it more accessible. We like to fact check statistics and sources and sort of look into the truth behind the headlines, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like pretty much as it says there, we try and remain unbiased. It's very difficult, as you're probably all aware, to try and remain unbiased to the best of your ability. And we try and point out when the media are intentionally leading people astray. That's the main drive behind our show, really, more than anything else.
And so we know that you're all kind of interested and engaged and probably well educated and interested in the sort of scientific method, so we apologise if at any point in the show we're telling you something that you already know. So what is fake news? We look at it as three strands. The first one is the sort of deliberate misinformation, false news, rumours started by online sources. You'll find this from things like that will present themselves as real news. So something like the Boston Telegraph during the Trump campaign might have been pushing a Republican agenda. And if you look into it, you'll find that the Boston Telegraph isn't actually a newspaper.
So we discovered a thing when we started doing the podcast, essentially, that if you've got a media outlet online and it's called media outlet, people don't really care about it. If you take a place and a word that is associated with newspapers, Times, Herald, Post, and you just smash those two together, so the Wisher Post, suddenly people now believe that this is a real paper, and they will then believe any garbage that you want to print on the internet. That's specifically what the Boston Times was doing. They were just producing information under... I mean, the Boston Times did actually exist, but it was 50 years old.
Yeah, and there was a lot of the Baltimore Chronicle, the Chicago Tribune, things...
Sacramento Herald, those type of things, any combination of those words.
But interestingly enough, one of the guys who was behind one of these sites, it was a guy called Paul Horner, and he spoke to the newspapers and explained that he was making $10,000 a month by producing fake news and by filling it with, AdSense type adverts and stuff like that. And he went about creating news that he knew would get clicks in order to make money from it.
Yeah, we actually found, when we done our original pilot podcast way back now, we discovered there was a guy who was an engineer by trade, and he had decided he wanted to prove that fake news was a thing, like that people would lap up fake news. He then discovered that people would lap up fake news, and then him and his wife started up an entire fake news network where they paid lots of people to make fake news, and he made himself lots of money from it. There's an ethics issue there at that point where I don't really believe that was his intention to start with, but eventually he was brought to justify his actions, and Paul Horner's a prime example of a modern version of that now.
Yeah, and we'll get back to Paul Horner later when we look at some of the stories. The second strand of it would be satirical news, so like a News Thump, the MASH report, stuff like that, which
Onion,
is
Cracked, the standard,
which is deliberately satirical. It's there for a laugh, although you will sometimes see people sharing that as if it's an actual story, which is
that
slightly
painful
terrifying.
share that you see on the internet.
The third strand would be mainstream news, which is just presented badly. It might be deliberately glossing over facts, or it might be deliberate misinformation.
Cherry picking facts as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we will talk about it later on, but it's very easy to take a graph and choose the bits that matter, and then put forward your opinion based on that, just ignoring the rest of the stuff that's there. So.
Yeah, and we'll look a bit at that later. So, one piece of fake news that you may or may not be familiar with was Pizzagate. Anyone here heard of Pizzagate? Yeah, a few of yous, right. So, for those who are uninitiated in the world of Pizzagate, in December 2016, it came to a head when a man went into Comet Pizza in the Washington area and kind of shot into the ceiling and demanded to see the basement of this place because he wanted to see the child porn ring that was being ran by Hillary Clinton.
There is a massive problem with that. The pizza place didn't actually have a basement. which makes it very difficult to have a child porn ring in the basement.
Yeah, and it came from John Podesta's leaked emails. They would often organise between him and Hillary and other members of the Democratic Party to have pizza party or to get pizza from Comet Pizza, and they were shortening it to CP. And the conspiracy theorists online
child porn.
decided that stood for child porn.
Which is all I would do with context. Hillary, would you like to go out for CP? Probably wasn't. Hillary, would you like to go out for child porn? But that's the suggestion that was made, and that's kind of where it all really came from.
Yeah, and despite quite large media coverage showing that this was complete bunkum, unfortunately there was a study from the Public Policy Polling which found that 14% of Trump supporters still believed it, and 32% were not sure could be true.
So of that poll, I mean, the big issue there is nearly 50%, nearly half of the Trump supporters that were polled believed that Hillary Clinton was involved in a paedophile ring in a pizza shop. And they still believe that in some form or another at that point. It's dangerous.
Yeah. One of the other things that they believe in was this about George Soros. So George Soros is a Hungarian-American who, a very, very rich man. He's worth $8 billion net right now, but he put $18 billion into his Open Society Foundation, which is a sort of lobbying group which does a lot of work worldwide, pushing kind of Western liberal democracy type stuff.
He funded the Hillary campaign about $10 million.
With about $10 million. But there was a piece of fake news that came out during the Trump campaign, which was started by the guy Paul Horner we spoke about at the start, the guy who makes $10,000 a month from fake news. So Paul Horner, in order to promote the idea that George Soros was paying protesters to disrupt Trump rallies, he put an advert on the website Craigslist in order to then create a news article on your newswire which said, look, George Soros is trying to recruit people to disrupt Trump rallies. Here's evidence of it happening. And this was then repeated by Trump. And Trump supporters quite openly on Twitter. To the point that 73% of them in the same poll by Public Policy Polling still believed that was a true thing. Now that's even though Paul has openly admitted that that's what he done, and we have evidence for that on the internet. So this is again another scenario where you have fake news that is... You already know, false. Yeah, you already know it's false, but it's still believed by the general public because of social media, the way that it gets shared out, and that's... Unfortunately, this was something which was kind of quite rife during the Trump campaign. You had Michael Flynn, the guy who was sort of got in trouble. He was the NSA advisor. He had to resign, and he has been subject... He's been part of the Mueller investigation into Russia collusion. But Michael Flynn repeated the lie at a Trump rally that Sharia law was going to be introduced to Florida. Interestingly, just so you know, there's only 1% of the population, less than 1% of the population are Muslim in Florida, and most Muslims in the US are actually in New Jersey at 3%. So it was a strange place to choose of all the places available to them. I don't know if the rally was in Florida, but... Weirdly, also, Arkansas and New York are the next two highest places. Not expected, but I was stuck in the numbers. There you go. The other thing that Michael Flynn did was he tweeted, he has now deleted the tweet, stating that Democrats were involved in a sex crime ring. So you had people at the very top of the Trump campaign pushing this sort of... fake news agenda. And the thing is, a deleted tweet is still a seen tweet. As soon as it's been retweeted, it doesn't matter if he's deleted it because people have already seen it and shared it. And this is where, again, another problem comes from. The lie gets spread. Yeah. So we had a look at a few studies into fake news. This was the first one from Stanford University. It looked at, as you can see here, thousands of students at middle school, high school and college level. And there was quite a good range. The methodology was well done. So it looked at inner city schools in Los Angeles. It looked at suburban schools in Minneapolis. It looked at 6 universities, including Stanford, and which large state universities as well. The big massive ones that have less of a knockback rate. I mean, Stanford knocks back 94% of applicants, and then some of the other universities, except nearly 100% of the applicants. So they were looking at a broad range of society when they did this study. There were 56 tasks, and they were put across 12 different states altogether as well. And they looked at things like getting students to distinguish between adverts and non-adverts, between sponsored articles.
Yeah, paid for and not paid for, fake news, not fake news.
They got them to search online to verify claims that had been made. And unfortunately, the study found that at all levels, middle school, high school and college level, and at all sort of levels of ability, from Stanford down to middle school, young people's ability to reason about information on the internet can be summed up in one word: bleak. So it's not looking great for the future of fake news.
Now, that might well be because of the way that they've now got news. I mean, there's a generation gap where they only get news from what they see on Facebook now. And so there is a lot of people who are of an older generation who have seen news come and go from different sources, whereas they just go on Facebook, they look on Facebook, the news is there on Facebook. The problem is an echo chamber. And that's actually one of the things that really create the fake news issue, where if everyone on your Facebook is all your friends and they all have the same political beliefs, they only share the same mindset. If they're only sharing the same mindset from the same set of sources, there's no reason for you to question it, because all it's doing is confirming what you already believe. It's absolute confirmation bias.
I was surprised personally looking at this, because in my head, I'm thinking that the generation that's coming up now is much more internet literate than maybe we were as kids. But
it's because you're so young and down
yeah.
with the kids.
But they've done the study, and you know the methodology looks pretty good for me. This other study was MIT, largest ever study of fake news. They looked at 126,000 contested articles which were tweeted by 3 million users. That was over 10 years, and they looked at what they considered to be the most controversial topics and news stories over that 10-year period. Now,
the methodology is a bit sus, though.
Methodology, we'll look at the methodology. Interestingly, what they found was, though, that fake news travels much faster. It reaches more people, it penetrates far deeper into the social networks, and it travels faster as well. The other thing about it was that they found that to reach 1,500 people on average, fake news reached those 1,500 people 6 times faster than news stories which are accurate and true.
Now, there's probably components to that. I mean, if you think about the fact that a lot of fake news is, like I said, the first either confirmation bias. You're just sharing out, look, this is what I think, and this is proof of what I think. The other thing is, it's usually not the most pleasant of news for the most part, and people like the dour news, people like that. Like, no one ever tells you how good someone's done, but many people will tell you how awful people have been, do you know what I mean? So it's that's why fake news travels easier.
Potentially. What was interesting for me in this one was that bots would tweet out fake news and true news equally, so that didn't seem to make any difference to the study, and that controlling for every variable, they found that false stories were 70% more likely to be retweeted than true news. However, as Paul spoke about the methodology, how they put together this study was by analysing and scraping data from the 6 kind of major fact-checking websites. So PolitiFact, Snopes were all involved in this, and they then searched Twitter for these specific stories, whether they had been proven as false or true. So there's an argument that perhaps they were setting themselves up for a bad data set there.
I mean, you're already looking for fake stories. Like they're creating a scenario where. Yeah. I mean, you're creating a scenario where you're searching.
You're looking at controversial stories anyway, which are more likely to have fake news around them. So, looking at fake news again, we've come up with a wee analogy. The 3 stages of fake news, and the first one is the seed. This is a horticultural analogy. So
the best kind.
Deliberate misinformation for fake news articles published and shared by popular accounts. So this one in particular was from the website Zero Hedge, which was described by Media Bias Fact Check as having a terrible
Has been
record.
awful. I mean, it's been consistently really not good at telling the truth.
So the name of the article was the history of Syrian false flags exposed. You take the red pill,
It's
and
so
I show you
upsetting.
how
I hate
deep the
that.
rabbit hole
Like-
goes.
Also, we discussed this in great detail when we were looking at the picture. There is no context to these two pictures because that might just be a child lying down and then sitting up. So that might not actually be a dead child that's been fake news, which is what was insinuated by the article.
Also,
was-
that photo could have been taken before that photo. I mean, there is literally no context, and all the article is just lots of photos next to each other saying, "Look, see, they're making it up."
If you took a picture of me lying down, I would also look like a dead person. Like it's the beauty of lying down.
And they could,
Like it's
so that's the seed. The article with the complete misinformation is started there. Now that original tweet which you saw was retweeted 1,726 times, and it got 2,181 likes.
what I like about that is there's 400 people who liked it but didn't want to put their name to it and share it out themselves, which says a lot about the article in my opinion.
And we can see that it was shared a total of 15.7 thousand times, which might be an arbitrary number. So we'll look at what happened with a mainstream news article about the same kind of subject. Also, the fertilizer, by the way, that's the next part of the horticultural analogy.
The sharing on social media fertiliser.
Social media fertilizes it, and it helps to spread the fake news. This is a Guardian article about the Syria strikes. World reacts overnight strikes by US, UK, French forces. That was only shared 856 times.
I mean, I will say though that the problem is that the first article we looked at was about Syrian photographs being faked. This one, there's a lot less people like, haha, I told you the world reacts to. I mean, like, but yeah.
Also, a good number of those shares, you would hope in your soul, you would like to think that there was people going, look at this bullshit.
Look at this madness.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the third part of our analogy is the plant. So eventually they speak about this conspiracy type stuff. It spreads so much on social media that the mainstream media feels that they need to address it and discuss it. So we find the Australian news, we find BBC trending, we find, I think this one was in the Guardian, all talking about conspiracy theories being pushed online activists claiming Syria's chemical attacks were staged, etc., etc. Now, this has a few issues. You've bled the fake news into the mainstream. The mainstream media probably feels the need to address it because there's so many people talking about it, but by addressing it, they give it some amount of credence, and they also present it to an audience which may not be aware of it at all.
They present people to an audience, like, so the last article there with Sarah, whatever, no one knew who she was, or not no one, but lots of people didn't know who she was, and now the BBC are saying, look what Sarah says, and now people are suddenly looking at her Twitter, where she was deemed as in these articles spreading fake news, but she's now a celebrity in the minds of the people who are using social media.
And in the minds of conspiracy theorists. If you talk about conspiracy theories in the mainstream media, you are going to present that information to a certain percentage of people who are going to believe it, and you're going to create doubt in the minds of some people as well. And it's all about misinformation, propaganda, division, and there's a lot of evidence that that's a very deliberate thing, that is what the purpose of the original seed was.
Yeah, to create that scenario, a lot of people look at the BBC articles and it says it in the BBC, so it must have been fact-checked, it must be true. So people then don't question the fact that they've now read it in the BBC.
So if we look at we look at this guy here. This is Alexander Gelyevich Dugan, I'm not 100% sure, but he is a Russian political analyst who has close ties to the Kremlin and to the Russian military.
He's friends with Putin.
Well, there are...
He's friends with people who are friends with Putin.
There's a certain school of thought which says that he's a close advisor to Putin. There are other people who dispute that and say he's keeping them at arm's length, but certainly he has been an influential writer. And in 1997, he wrote the book, The Foundations of Geopolitics, The Geopolitical Future of Russia. Good bedtime reading.
It was a good book. Yeah.
So what he talks about in the book is that he believes that Russia can still be the staging post for an anti-bourgeois, anti-American revolution. He also talks about that the common enemy of the Eurasian people is Western liberal democracy, and he rejects the close relationship between the United States, Canada, and Europe. He puts forward the idea in the book that Ukraine should be annexed and should become part of Russia. There's obviously evidence that Russia have made moves towards taking part of Ukraine.
Another weird thing that he also discussed in his book in 1997 was how it would be worthwhile to take the UK and separate it from the rest of the EU and have it as away from part of that, because it would be worthwhile for
he suggests that it should
segregation.
be a Russian foreign policy pursuit to break the UK away from Europe. And his methodology for doing all this is to move away from traditional military operations and to move towards using propaganda to believes what is necessary is a refined program of subversion, disruption and propaganda organised by Russian special services. So exactly the sort of stuff that we're seeing happening with Russian bots.
The troll farms, we've heard about them a lot.
Yeah, involvement in the
Trump
campaigns, involvement in Brexit. I read an article yesterday that was saying that 9 out of 10 of the bots that a study by Swansea University looked at in our general election last year, 9 out of 10 of them were tweeting pro-Corbyn stuff and anti-Conservative Party stuff. So they are getting themselves involved, certainly, in politics all over the Western world and trying to disrupt it. That's what the evidence would appear to show.
And that's it. We've got another, I think the next slide actually covers the next Russian in question here.
Well, so some of the other things which have happened, like during the Trump campaign in Texas in 2016, there's evidence that a Russian troll farm set up events in Texas.
I mean, it's not even evidence. It's almost 100% proven that essentially they created both events. They created
an anti-Islamic march in Texas
and an Antifa march at the same time to have people just fighting with each other over a thing that they didn't care about, but it meant that it was causing a divide between the populace.
He stated that Russia should utilise special services in the USA to fuel instability and separatism, for instance provoking Afro-American racists. And as we can see here, he says that Russia should introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist and sectarian groups, thus destabilising internal political processes in the US. It would also make sense simultaneously to support isolationist tendencies in American politics. So we can see that happening with Trump.
I mean, it's weird because we see a lot of connections, and we've actually discussed in a few of our episodes, there's certain connections between, not maybe to the level that everyone makes out, but there is connections between Russia and Trump, where Trump does want to create a isolationist version of America, which is more making America great again. I've got my fake news hat. Just see. But yeah, so the fact that he's talking about this in 1997, it's easy to see that there might be some political reason behind Russia's involvement, rather than just the way that it's made out in the news, which is opportunism. Yeah.
One of the other guys in Russia who you might be familiar with, you might not, is a guy called Vladislav Surkov, who is a major advisor to Putin. He's worked as part of his government. He was talked about in some of the Adam Curtis documentaries, and Vladislav Surkov is basically his spin guy, his PR guy. He's got a background in modern abstract theatre, weirdly enough, and his basic...
Imagine what it's like in the Kremlin.
His basic premise is to be an ever-shifting, impossible to pin down construct. So 1 week they might support neo-Nazis and fund neo-Nazis and make a positive press statement about neo-Nazis, and the following week they'll do the same thing about an LGBT rights group. The idea being that it's impossible to start a revolution when you don't know what you're fighting against or what they stand for. Yeah. And so that's there's a lot of evidence that this information and this confusion is the modus operandi of the Russian special services.
There's certainly people within the Russian government who taken this on board.
So, as we looked before into fake news bleeding into the mainstream media, the problem is compounded when the mainstream media reports poorly about it.
They get it wrong.
So, in the aftermath of some of the chat on Twitter about the Skripal poisoning, The Guardian published this article, and it named a couple of people online as being Russian bots who were promoting Syrian or Skripal-related conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, one of the people they named was @PartisanGirl on Twitter, and they called her a Russian bot. And she then did a video explaining how she's not a Russian bot and she's been a journalist. I feel basically a very cursory glance at Google would have shown the journalists that were writing this that she was a real person. She's been writing articles and producing videos since at least 2014.
Infowar.
For Infowars, yeah. Right. So the problem that you have here is that you have now given these people an excuse to go, well, look, see, the mainstream media is trying to cover up this stuff. They're trying
her name as well, so now she is now a thing that people know about.
Yeah, but she, like her name is freely available. She has a Wikipedia entry. Her name's
but to the general people,
I know, but her name's Madam Susley, and it's poor journalism. But then you've now got a situation whereby you're giving the conspiracy theorists fuel because they are going, well, look, this mainstream media outlet is clearly trying to silence this girl. She must be saying something which is worthwhile to hear.
It's also made worse because this bit may well be true, but because this bit is absolutely garbage, it then makes this bit garbage in the eyes of a lot of people.
Yeah, and also it may have the effect of making people who would have believed this and who are consumers of mainstream news question what they're looking at and start to move towards online conspiracy theorists.
And a lot of the stuff she puts it is hellish, just so you're aware.
So here we have 4 other people who were accused of spreading misinformation.
This is a bit of spot the bot.
Yeah, so we have 4 people here. Would any of you care to guess which one is the bot or certainly some sort of psyops construct? We have Vanessa Beeley over here, Robert Fisk, Ian 56789, and Sarah Abdallah. Would anybody care to guess which one of these is a bot?
The fact that 3 of them are in a circle and 1 isn't has got nothing to do with this. But it's just like
maybe one of them doesn't have a Twitter account. But yeah, anybody want to make a guess? Yeah. No, it's not. But a good guess. It's actually Sarah Abdallah. But we'll talk a little bit. Vanessa Beeley is a journalist who, you know, I'll put that in.
She has a journalist. She has in it. She certainly pushes agenda.
She's been writing articles. Initially, she was living in Palestine or travelling to Palestine and writing articles in Palestine. Since 2015, she's largely been writing articles about Syria. She's been accused of being very pro-Assad, and there's evidence that Assad's put her up in hotels and transported her to, you know,
the nice places to report in.
Yeah, or places where there's been chemical attacks. But he's trying to get her to push agenda and potentially putting her in front of people who are going to tell her the story that he wants her to tell.
I'm sure we don't have to really touch on Robert Fisk, but essentially he's a real journalist with lots of credentials that go along with his name. Do you know what I mean?
Robert Fisk was the first journalist to go into Duma after the chemical attack. He was working for the Independent at the time, and the article was published in the Independent. Robert Fisk has 7 times been named the British Press Awards Foreign Journalist of the Year, or International Journalist of the Year.
International gave him an award for being...
And he's won an Orwell Award.
And he was dragged through the mud at the back that he essentially said there was no obvious evidence that there was chemical attacks, and what he was seeing was the people saying there wasn't chemical attacks in the area. He actually suggested that the breathing issues and stuff like that were from bombings.
But from dust.
And respiratory problems rather than chemical bombings.
But again, he has been accused of being very pro-Assad, and that Assad has sent him in before anybody else and put him in front of people who are going to push his agenda.
The danger that you always get with him, though, is if people don't know who he is and then they're reading standard mainstream media and they're being told that he's essentially some mad cook who has no idea what he's talking about, he is a real journalist with real credentials. Like, maybe he may be pushing an agenda at this point, but you can't then say that he's not got any journalistic integrity at all, because he has proven time and time again that he does.
Well, his peers in the UK have voted for him to win awards many times. Now, Ian 56789 is not a bot, but I would suggest he might have picked a better name. If he doesn't want to think he's a bot.
John 12345, and also annoyingly Ian 56788 were all taken all the way up. So that was the next one in the line. That was.
But he actually did a 7-minute interview on Sky News to prove that he wasn't a bot, in which he spouted a lot of the kind of stuff that you would hear on InfoWars for Alex Jones, and Sky News gave him a 7-minute platform to do that. But Sarah Abdallah is the one who is certainly not what she appears to be.
Now, we made an effort. We made an effort to look into Sarah quite a bit.
Well, yeah, she was accused of being a bot by the BBC, so we got in touch with her through a couple of Twitter accounts to offer her an interview, and she blocked us both times. We asked her a couple of questions about whether she was a bot, and she blocked us again for that.
And then a lot of people with quite generic looking names had opinions on the fact we were asking her questions, not saying that that's related, but it's another thing that seemed to happen quite conveniently.
She has 133,000 Twitter followers, including over 250 journalists from all of these very reputable places, and including 60 politicians from around the world, including the US, UK, France, Canada,
Venezuela's been included in that list, which is the important politicians.
But interestingly, she has never published any news articles in any language or any video or audio journalism or interviews, nothing. If you go to the website, which is linked on our Twitter account, this is every page. Sorry, we couldn't find any posts. Please try again.
And like I said, she has avoided us like the plague, and all we wanted to do was give her the same platform that has been invited to everyone else, to allow them to prove that they're not a bot. I mean, we weren't trying to prove that she was a bot. But
all of those other people who have been accused of being bots have proven that they're not. For example, Ian 56789 was named in the same Guardian article as a partisan girl. Both of them threatened the Guardian with legal action, and they had to change the wording of their story.
They changed Twitter bot to Twitter user. Yeah.
So that kind of covers the first strand, which was the fake news, the deliberate misinformation on the internet. We're now going to have a quick look at mainstream media, and I think given that we've looked at the sort of background of some of the online journalists, it's only fair that we look at some of the people who own the mainstream media in the UK. So you'll all be familiar, I presume, with Rupert Murdoch.
He's a baddie.
He's worth $15.6 billion net. He owns the Times, the Sun, Sky, also Fox News, and he formerly owned Fox until he sold it to Disney recently. There's a lot of media ownership issues. He was obviously his papers were involved in the news hacking scandal. Phone hacking scandal. Sorry, yeah, and as Paul says, generally not a great guy. Also a non-dom for tax purposes in the UK.
Which then brings us on to Viscount Rothermere, which, as you can probably tell by his name, has no desire to try and swear in his political affiliation in any way, shape or form. But he also owns some possibly, the Daily Mail, as you're probably aware, is rife with anti-everything sentiment. But more importantly, he also owns the Metro. Now, if you give out the free paper to everyone, you don't need anyone to purchase your paper to push your agenda, because everyone is tired and reading the paper on the train. So he has managed to do something that none of the rest of them are doing. He is pushing the Daily Mail's agenda to people who just are picking up a paper in the morning.
Who would never buy the Daily Mail.
Who would never buy the Daily Mail, but they're just picking it up. And most people don't know that those two are essentially sister papers. That's something to think about the next time you're on the train. As in, burn. No, don't burn. I don't recommend that.
So yeah, he's worth 1.29 billion as well, and he's also a non-dom for tax purposes, so he's also not paying tax in the UK.
Our favourite media owners are next on the list. Because the Bartley brothers are twin brothers who, without a word of a lie, live in a castle on an island, right? And they took away people's happiness when they wouldn't vote for their government, made the doctor quit because he wouldn't use their helicopter. They're like the worst group of people that have existed.
Can I just say, by the way, we are happy to provide all of the sources for all the information in this to anybody who wants it. Just there's cards kicking about that have got our website, and our email address is info@notanotherfake.newscast. We have sources for everything that we're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like as much as I want to be making this up, it's all real. And we've covered a lot of this in our earlier episodes as well, and we have all the sources for that.
They live on the island of Breku, I think that's how you pronounce it, but it's off of Sark in the Channel Islands. Again, they're worth $9.7 billion. They are not paying UK tax either. They own the Ritz in London, which is a hotel worth $7 million, and they haven't paid corporation tax for 17 years on it. They live in a castle. they live in a castle. They are twin brothers who live in a castle together.
But wait, with two separate swimming pools, which suggests that even though they're twin brothers, they don't like to swim together.
It's a $60 million mansion with 2 swimming pools and a helicopter pad, and I'm guessing a sex dungeon. I don't know. I don't know.
2 sex dungeons. They're no weird.
So yeah, and anyone here Russian?
Or can speak Russian. Oh,
Yeah.
that was
How do you pronounce that? Right.
Right, well, that's...
Yevgeny Lebedev is the son of Alexander Lebedev, who I believe was a vocal opponent of Putin, certainly in the past. He gifted the newspaper to his son, allegedly for tax purposes as well. Alexander Lebedev, his ex-KGB, he's worth $1.1 billion, and he doesn't pay UK tax.
His son does.
He does.
We'll call him his son because it means we won't butcher that name.
They own The Independent and the Evening Standard. Evening Standard is edited by George Osborne. The Independent is one of the more left-wing newspapers in the UK. Interestingly, it was The Independent which published the story by Robert Fisk about Duma initially. So they are Russians. There is an argument that they may have been pushing the line that Russia's ally were not doing anything bad there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you have to remember is he is not pro-Putin, but that does not mean that he's not pro-Russian. Right? So, like, they're not one and the same thing, and yeah.
But Evgeny is a journalist in his own right. He has done exposés on the KKK. He has written about the Mexican drug wars. He's written for the BBC, for The Guardian, for Vogue, for the New Statesman, and for Vanity Fair. Yeah. As a journalist before he owned The Independent. So he does kind of have a bit of credibility in that respect. Trinity Mirror are the sort of conglomerate corporation that own both the Mirror and the Daily Record. They turned over 623 million last year with a profit of 62.8 million, and not last year, 2016, the last year that we have figures for. They recently acquired the Daily Express and the Star, which are 2 extremely right-wing papers, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them going forward. Will they continue to have a right-wing stance, and are they just trying to diversify, or will they try and sort of correct
page
that?
Page 3 in the Mirror and the Daily Record and the rest of them.
But interestingly, the Express and the Star were previously owned by a guy called Richard Desmond, who was a major donator to UKIP and to the Leave campaign. He gave UKIP £1 million. He gave the Leave campaign a lot of money. He was the ex-owner of Channel 5 and also started off in pornography.
Asian Babes. He owned Asian Babes.
Which is quite ironic for the owner of the Daily Express.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. The irony is not lost.
So looking at this is from Loughborough University, a wee paper that they did looking at newspapers in and around the 2017 general election in the UK. So they found that balanced positive to negative newspaper items, and this was across the entire UK press, so every single newspaper. They looked at the sort of positive or negative coverage that all of these 5 parties got.
I was going to say, conveniently though, when you're actually looking at these, you have to remember that in the manifesto of the Conservatives, they were going to get rid of the second stage of Leveson, whereas Labour were going to enforce it. Not saying that that's directly related to the way that they had portrayed them in the paper, but
I mean, yeah, I see where you're coming from. The counterpoint to that would be that there are left-wing newspapers which were still pro-Labour, even though Leveson 2 might not have been a good thing for them.
Leveson harder.
That's what they call it. So yeah, as you can see, major negative press of Labour in the lead up to the 2017 election. Lib Dems negative and UKIP negative too. SNP slightly positive.
Weirdly, SNP was slightly positive, which I didn't really expect to see on that graph.
I think, but if you look back and think about it, the SNP did get quite positive coverage in a lot of the English newspapers. Maybe not in some of the Scottish ones, but it's a different. That's not going to affect the circulation numbers as much as the papers in England would. This is a breakdown of individual newspapers prior to the 2017 election. So what's particularly interesting at a glance is that it seems that negative coverage of the opponents was far favourable to most of the papers to positive coverage of the party that they were in favour of.
The other convenient thing that you could probably notice here is there was only two papers that had particularly positive outlook on UKIP.
And they were
both
papers
owned
that
by
were
the guy who was giving money to UKIP. Yeah. So he was pushing an agenda there.
You also can see that the vast majority of the right-wing press were heavy negative on Labour. The Express was massively negative on Labour, only slightly positive and Conservative. And the Mirror were the most positive towards Labour.
But again, equally as positive on UKIP as they were Conservative. It's just, again, something like that man was paying money towards UKIP. That was his thing.
These next two are looking at the 2015 general election versus the 2017 general election in the next slide. But what you can see is the same idea. We have the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Express, the Times, the Sun are all quite positive towards the Tories, and the Guardian, the Mirror, Independent, the Star in this case, quite positive towards Labour.
The Star in this case includes the Scottish Star, which is probably one of the reasons that it's more positive towards Labour because of the clientele that it's selling to.
But the big difference between the 2015 election and the 2017 is that on the left wing of the press, you have quite a number of readers who are voting for the Greens, and on the right wing, you have a large number who are voting for UKIP. This is obviously prior to the Brexit vote. When you look at 2017, the vote for the Greens and UKIP is more or less evaporated, and it looks that our politics has become seriously polarised. It's either one or the other. People seem to be voting for Labour and the Tories. Now, the question that you have is, are people reading these newspapers because of the party that they support, or do they support the party because they are reading newspapers?
The other thing is that's really infuriating that you'll probably all notice when you see this is Statista annoyingly chose to not have this in line with the rest of the graph, and it's upsetting to look at. It's really, really upsetting.
So we've kind of seen broadly where the readers of newspapers lie and how positively they cover the main parties. So we're just going to have a quick look at how two of the main newspapers, one left wing and one right wing, decided to cover the Office of National Statistics migration report back in February the 22nd this year. This is the latest report that's came out for the migration stats. The Guardian, obviously a left-wing paper, have decided to go with net migration of EU nationals to Britain. Again,
just quickly, Brexodus is the best way to summarise that. I mean, it made me so happy when I read that. But yeah, so they have, that is a very anti-Brexit sentiment, the way that they've framed it, that the obviously the EU immigration has dropped considerably. Now, if you want to compare that to the next one, which is the same set of figures, the Sun...
Sun is with bordering insanity!
Yes, because it turns out there's a lot more non-EU citizens coming. Now, both those pieces of information are actually true.
Yeah, both factually accurate.
But if you've chosen to just focus on this, I mean, I would actually say in this case that the Guardian are actually have a more negative view on it, because the Guardian aren't focusing on the fact that immigration has went up,
which it has in this handy graph.
But in fact, the way that it reads like immigration has dropped.
Well, yeah, they have chosen just to focus on the EU net migration part in the Guardian. At least the Sun have put a graph in, although they neglect to mention the fact that EU net migration is going down. The both of them are guilty of cherry picking facts and statistics and presenting the narrative that they want to present. Like,
also, weirdly, the Sun included Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans in there for no obvious reason. It's just seems like a weird thing to include.
But basically, what this demonstrates is you're far better to read a story from two different newspapers, at least on the opposing side of the political argument, to get the full story, or even better,
if you love the thrill that we love, actually read the report that goes behind it and see what the actual numbers mean. It's the best way to go about doing it, really.
And as we spoke before about how fake news bleeds into the mainstream media, you also have a situation whereby the broadcast media have much tighter regulations, particularly the BBC, over bias and partisanship, etc. However, you have a situation where the press are still able to influence the agenda and the debate and the discourse of the broadcast media via the newspapers.
So what you do is, you have a section in your TV show where you say, let's see what it says in the newspapers. And then it means you're not, that's not your opinion, that's merely the opinion. Also, can we just say, Janet Street Porter's head's exploding in that bottom picture, and it's wonderful. But yeah, so you then get to so say you as a producer have an affiliation towards the right, you can then use the Sun and the likes on this component of your show, and you can say, look what the Sun's saying about immigration, for example. And then it means that you never said that. It's just the Sun.
Yeah, you're just showing what the Sun said.
Yeah, I mean, you've got no control over that. You can only show what the papers say. But they don't always show a particularly balanced run of all the papers and what they're all showing.
And even if they do, there are far more right-wing newspapers in the UK than there are left-wing ones.
Well, certainly. And then one of the things that you have is when, again, with like UKIP, for example, that's another problem that you've got, where if you have two newspapers that are being funded by the man who is funding UKIP or putting money towards UKIP, if you've got 7 newspapers that you're putting out there and 2 of them have got a pro-UKIP stance, you're then putting forward a pro-UKIP stance to the general public.
Yeah, it was actually found that on BBC Question Time between 2010 and 2016, UKIP representatives appeared on 24% of the Question Time shows in that period, despite the fact that they only had 2 MPs during that period. One of them was Mark Reckless, who lasted for 6 months. The other one was Douglas Carswell, who was in for 2.5 years.
Compare that to the Green, it's probably the best way.
To the Greens, had 1 MP throughout that entire 6 or 7 year period, only appeared on 7% of shows. The SNP, who had 97 MPs in total throughout that entire period, 6 at the least at any one time, and for a couple of years in that were the second biggest party in the UK, only appeared on 18% of BBC Question Time shows. So
Jerry actually needs a lot of credit for that, because that number didn't exist, and he sat and went through every single, I'm not even kidding, every single episode, and checked who was on every single episode and done the numbers.
It was a fun night in. You know, the issue that you have there is obviously it's totally disproportionate representation of UKIP on the BBC's flagship political TV show.
Now, the BBC would claim, though, that that's because there was a rise in UKIP, surely.
Well, they were asked questions about it in Parliament, particularly by I completely forget the name of the leader of the Green Party right now. Yes, Caroline Lucas. Yeah. So she asked questions about it in Parliament, and the BBC's answer was, well, we had to meet the demand of the rise in the popularity of UKIP. But a paper by Murphy and Devine in 2016 for the Political Studies Association showed evidence that disproportionate media coverage of UKIP had actually driven the support of the party, not the other way around. So you need to really tread carefully in terms of what you're putting on the TV. Anyway, so that's pretty much everything that we have on fake news, mainstream and online. The last few slides is just a little bit of an insight into how perhaps this affects the way that we look at the world.
How the general populace perceive things because of what they read in the news.
Yeah. So it's from an Ipsos Mori study called The Perils of Perception. The first question that we looked at was about murder rate. And it said, do you think the murder rate in country, for country, put in your country, is higher, lower, or about the same as it was in 2000? And it turns out that everybody thinks that their murder rate's higher, but really, for the vast majority of countries that were looked at, it's lower. Some 78%, 68%, 50%, or so lower. For the UK,
Mexico and Peru, not great holiday destinations, as it turns out, just so you're aware.
I think Great Britain came in at 29% lower.
Yeah, Karen's plus, yeah, as well.
But yeah, turns out that 19% only of people in the UK believe that the murder rate had went down when actually it had.
I love the middle bit, the middle run of people just going, nah, it's probably not changed. Same amount of people dying.
This one I was particularly interested in. It was about terrorist deaths, which is not the death of terrorists.
Which is what I thought when I read it at first.
It's people that were killed by terrorist attacks. So it's either the 15-year period previous to 9/11 or the 15-year period after. Do you think more people were killed before or after? Turns out again that the vast majority of countries believe that the terrorist deaths were far higher post 9/11, and that's not the case. In the UK in particular, there was 311 terrorist deaths preceding 9/11 and only 62 in the 15 years after.
Up to 2016. Obviously the number would be higher now.
It would be higher now, yeah. And also I think it's worth stating that a large percentage of that was Lockerbie.
Yeah. I would also like to point out that when I said Peru wasn't a great place to go on holiday, there was 8,222 deaths, terrorist deaths before, and then only 110 after. So they have worked wonders on the terrorism death area, just not the murders in general. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is.
But yeah, only 14% of people in Great Britain believe that that's the case. No, 15%. Sorry. And the last one is the percentage of the prison population which are immigrants. So turns out everybody thinks they have a far higher immigrant population in prison than they do.
So I had done the numbers on this when I was reading through it, and this depressed the ever-loving shit out of me when I read it, because if you put up the graph, quick summary, pretty much 18 of the 40 odd that are there think that at least a third of the people that are in their jail are foreigners, and only 9 of them is that the case. So everyone just thinks their prison is full of foreign people, like pretty much across the board. Well, half of the countries that were asked.
But Saudi Arabia don't. Saudi Arabia, I think they've got a quarter of their prison population that's foreign, but it turns out they've got
everyone in the prison is foreign. That's because in Saudi Arabia they murder a lot of people, like through their judicial system. You know what I mean? So they don't make their way to prison. I mean,
fair point. So Great Britain, 23% overestimation. We on average believe that 34% of our prison population is immigrants, when actually it's less than 12%.
Another thing is the Netherlands and France, who are up quite high on it. When we were looking into it and discussing it, one of the things is the classification of an immigrant. So there's people who are in jail in like the Netherlands and France who are, for all intents and purposes, French, but they are from, say, the Ivory Coast. So they are French if it came to a sporting event, for example, but they're not. They're technically an immigrant when they go to jail. So that
But they could
skews these
represent
numbers.
France at football.
They could represent France at football, yeah, exactly. So it skews the numbers a little.
Yeah, so that's basically it. We'll just leave you a wee quote for Jonathan Swift. Falsehood flies and the truth comes limping after it. We'll hopefully want to change that.
Indeed. So that's where we are at the moment for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much.